Okay, maybe I got my dates off, but I'm here at the Marriott Marina Hotel in San Diego, and I don't see anybody. What gives?
It's time for the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. The podcast you look forward to for all of your news and reviews of the best comic books hitting stands. Whether it's DC, Batman, Wonder Woman, Marvel, Spider-Man, Image, Spawn, Saga, Boom, Once and Future, Power Rangers, or whatever book or publisher you follow. We cover them all here. This is the place for you. That's right. It's for everyone. This is the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Let's get it.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I am, of course, your host, Theo. And yeah, I am in sunny San Diego. I'm actually at the Marriott Marina Hotel right next door to the San Diego Convention Center where Comic-Con 2026 will be held in a couple of months. So yeah, I'm here a little bit early, but I'm here for a business conference with work. So, but got a great episode for you this time around. I have Evan Narcisse coming back on the show, and we are going to be talking about Batman Static Beyond number 6, the final issue of his miniseries over on the Elseworlds imprint at DC Comics that was written by him with art drawn by Miguel Mendonça and with covers by Nicholas Draper Ivy. Cannot forget the work that Nick has contributed to this story, starting out not only doing the covers but also the interiors before just finishing out and doing the covers for the miniseries. But we talk a little bit about, not only what happens in issue 6, so there will be spoilers. So if you haven't read it yet, pause, come on back, and then listen in as far as we talk about what happens in issue 6. But also we talk a little bit about the story as a whole and what the future may hold for this version of Batman, Terry McGinnis and Static in this universe that he and Nick and Miguel created for us. And then after that, of course, as always, we'll close out with a look at some of my favorite comics from this past New Comic Book Day and New Comic Book Day. That was just this past Saturday. So, yeah, we'll be looking at all of that. And then I'm also going to close out with something new that I'm going to be doing. There's been a lot of conversations about indie titles that are out there that's not necessarily at a known publisher, so it may be self-published or things of that nature. So I'm going to be talking about one of the titles that I recently picked up and read a few weeks ago. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But with that being said, here is my conversation with comic book writer Evan Narcisse, and talking about Batman Static Beyond number 6, as well as the series as a whole. And I hope you all enjoy it, and I'll see you all on the other side. Hey folks, it is Theo, and I'm here in San Diego, California, and I guess I'm a few months early because I don't see no Comic-Con folks here, but I am sitting here with comic book writer Evan Narcisse. Evan, welcome back to the show. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, Theo. Trying to, hanging in there as best I can in these wild, wild times.
It is definitely some wild, wild times. So you have one thing off your plate. Batman Static Beyond is completed. Issues come out on this past Wednesday. And I didn't think I would like the Terry Virgil team up as much as I did. So great job on getting that story done and completed. How does it feel to have it finally all finished?
Really good, really meaningful. This has been like one of I'll just be blunt, like one of the best selling books of my career so far. I'm glad that the folks came out and supported it. It should be clear to anybody who knows me and my history as like a journalist and critic, that I put a lot of love for the Milestone universe in these books, but also drawing from, a deep connection with Batman mythology, I want to show these characters together in a way that um, expanded on the relationships that we've seen in other media, right? So like the Justice League Unlimited show, um, and the various crossovers that the Batman animated series had with Static Shock, the TV show. Like all that is in there, and but the main thing for me is I want to push that stuff forward, like not just like have it be like a nostalgia carousel, um, and show what like alternate universe versions of these characters um, would move towards, like as they got older, right? So the way that Ebon shows up and what his specific like mission is as an older person in Dakota, that stuff to me is like of a piece with the Ebon from the cartoon, and then Shadows of Dakota miniseries that Vic and Nita did. I said Vic and Nita, Nick and Vita. Wow. I'm tired, y'all. I've been up since way too early. But yeah. So like, I just want to show all those characters like growing into future selves that made sense based on like previous iterations. And this is Elseworld, so that's the fun of doing this kind of project. You can mash like different continuities together. I don't know if I said this last time we talked, but it's not my job to give this Earth a number and put it, slot it into the orrery of worlds or whatever rubric DC is using for like their multiverse mapping. That's not my job. My job is to tell a good story, and hopefully I did that. But I do want there to be like some resonance with all the different versions of these characters as they've appeared in different places.
Yeah, and you mentioned Elseworlds, and I was going to ask this a little later, but since you mentioned it, I will. Yeah, it has that Elseworlds imprint on there, but considering what we've gotten, especially with the Dakota incident, this really could have been a main continuity story. Was that the point, that even though it's Elseworlds, you could fit this into what we're reading in main continuity?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And look, back in the day, we saw stories happen that were like, is this main continuity? I don't know, but then it winds up being folded in. I'm thinking of like the Killing Joke, for example, right? Like Killing Joke happened during a moment where like these kind of silos for continuity, like Elseworlds, weren't like really super defined yet. But next thing you know, there's Barbara Gordon in a wheelchair showing up in Suicide Squad as Oracle. Like so I think it's one of the ways that like continuity can be a good tool, is like to inspire future stories. And if these reinterpretations and revisitations like gain traction, then that's the canon, right? So I personally don't like blocking anything off, and as a reader I say, and as a writer too. So yeah, like it's not like anybody at DC editorial told me like, and this is the new continuity. Like the thing is to tell a good story, and that's what I tried to do.
Great.
That's what we tried to do, I should say. Not me and the whole creative team.
Yeah, you mentioned Ebon's growth, that we see in the story, but there was a lot of growth amongst most of the characters. We saw some growth in Carrie. We saw some growth in Shutdown. Once we get to the end of this issue, and again, we will have some light spoilers. So if you haven't read the issue yet, hit pause, go read it, come back. But we see by the end of the issue, he has some growth as well, to the point where we get a nice panel at the end of the page, end of the story. So how did you mark out and plan this growth factor for all of the characters that are in this story, not counting Stat because he's an old man right now.
Yeah, I mean, old, like
Well,
mid 30s, mid 40s. Yeah, yeah,
they would call us boomers,
yeah. I mean, not for nothing. It really struck me as I was wrapping up the series. Like, you can count on one hand the amount of times we've seen Virgil as an adult in like comics and TV, right? Like, we often encounter him as a teenager. So, like, following on to answer your question, like, Virgil is very much the same person, but with more skill, knowledge, wisdom, and responsibility, right? Like, he's really taking upon himself to do what he can um, with all those things I mentioned: skill, knowledge, power, wisdom. He's taking upon himself to use all those attributes to make the world a better place, right? He's not trying to like reorder the world like socioculturally or socioeconomically, but he's like, here's a problem. Um, I have the wherewithal to fix it. So that's him. And it was really thinking about like um, the relationships that the characters have with each other and their world, right? So Richie, his best friend, he's going to be there with him, helping his bud, like figure out a path to a better possible future, one that starts with the city that they grew up in, a city that was, um, in almost every milestone continuity, a city that was besieged, taken for granted, looked on as like a resource for extraction. This is all common, like in almost every like iteration of the milestone universe. You see these characters fighting people who want to steal like the very essence of the place, right? So Richie's going to be down to help Virgil with that. Ebon, like he's a character who's been angry at the circumstances created by the forces that assail Dakota, right? Like whether he's like the shadowy bad guy on the Static Shock cartoon show, or like the dude trying to save his brother in Shadows of Dakota, like he's like, I have a vision for how things could be better. It's darker. It's predicated on vengeance, but like it's very much about like, hey, I have people to protect. You know what I'm saying? Like, and that's mixed up with like, I got my own agenda. I have my own vision for what protection looks like, and what I would do with like a greater share of like institutional power. You know what I'm saying? And he's not, again, not unlike Virgil. He's not trying to reorder the whole world, but like his block. I'm talking metaphorically, not an actual city block or neighborhood, but like his hood, Dakota. He knows what happens when people there are not able to like defend themselves against these like bigger cultural forces. So he's building, he and his brother build an institution to train like future generations to be able to like control their own fates, and again, if you look back to the Big Bang as an inciting incident for every iteration of the Milestone universe, that happens because people thought like, whatever, it's just this like majority black multicultural city. We can pump this gas in, we can perform experiments on these people and nobody will care. And all this chaos and possibility comes out of that, right? So like Ebon's like, nah, this is not gonna happen again. Not on my watch, not with these kids, and again with the story that Nick and Vita told in Shadows of Dakota, we saw his brother be abducted, and experimented on, and he's like, this is not going to happen to any kid in this city if I can prevent it. Yeah, and like I didn't have the room for it, but like Aqua Maria showing up lets you know that like the Blood Syndicate from the comics, or whatever version of those characters, the permutations that they wound up embodying on a TV show and other places, they're gonna rep for their place. They're home for Dakota, and like, look, it is very easy and commonly understood that Batman, whether it's Terry or Bruce or somebody else, like Gotham is their domain, their purview, their protectorate, right? And Dakota's the same place for these other heroes from the milestone side of things. But with Terry, it's like, yeah, he is a member of the Justice League, but like in a way, more of an outsider than Bruce was, right? Because you know, Bruce had, I think, a similar level of experience when he's a Justice Leaguer, right? And Terry's a new kid, right? Um, and I want to play with that a little bit and show like the differing philosophies um, between like Virgil and Terry. The places you grow up in shape your worldview, and they have very different worldviews. Which again, there's that conversation in issue 5 where Terry's like, "What are we gonna do with Melvin when we find him? Where are we locking him up?" And Static's like, Who? We're gonna lock up a high schooler?" Like, that's you know, at the risk of sounding too political, like a carceral mindset, like throw the bad guys in jail, is something that happens in Gotham with regularity. But like when you are a target for policing and oppression, like the people in Dakota have been exponentially more than the people in Gotham, a hero who comes from Dakota is gonna have a different point of view.
So I'm happy you brought up Neo Gotham and Dakota because they are clearly different in this story, especially considering Dakota's history. It's not what it used to be because of the work of folks like Eban and Virgil. Was it was it difficult to develop Dakota, this version of Dakota, in the mindset that you did in order to get that contrast between Neo Gotham established?
I mean, I wouldn't say it was difficult because like it was one of my North Stars, like from the minute I accepted this assignment, right? I want to see Dakota in the future. Um, but I didn't want to be in the same place, I didn't want to be in the same, understood as like a city that's been hollowed out. I mean, look, Dwayne McDuffie, one of the founders of Milestone, was from Detroit, and Dakota isn't Detroit, but you can certainly make a case for it being heavily modeled on Detroit. And so, what happened in Detroit? It was a hub of industry, and manufacturing, like the heart of the automotive industry in the United States. And a bunch of socioeconomic changes happen, and it becomes a shadow of a shell of its former self, right? Um, I just want to imagine a way forward for that kind of a place, you know, that started from the ground up. Um, and then when you have characters like Virgil and Richie and Ebon, and their mentors, like I mentioned, Curtis Metcalf, aka Hardware, in there. Like, yeah, like Dakota has always been like an all we got is us type city, right? So like, if some of the us isn't there, our people like Curtis, Virgil, Richie, Ebon, etc., then they're gonna do what they can to like better their circumstances. So yeah, Nick was on board with that from Jump, and he did these lovely renditions of Dakota City as what I was calling like a little bit of a solar punk, you know, near utopia. Like I don't really believe in utopias, but like they turn things around because nobody else is going to do it for them. And to me that is the ethos of like Milestone as like a real world phenomenon and a fictional construct. Like yeah, like you got to do it for yourself. And Virgil's that kind of character, and that's where I wanted to create some of the contrasts. Whereas like Gotham is a city rooted in old world money, politics, understandings. Like
And the
I
Neo
think
doesn't change that.
yeah, the Neo doesn't change things that much. Like there's class hierarchies there, and I think maybe like more of an inflexibility in terms of social consciousness there, right? Um, but like you look at something like Court of Owls, right? I think that's one of the best modern day additions to Gotham, the Gotham mythos, because it's like it communicates this idea that like since the beginning, since the founding of this city, there were people who were looking to cement their status like as the rulers of the city, the people who benefited from the city existing the most, right? And like, you know, Batman for all his resources is one dude against a whole secret society, right? Um, and he doesn't, he aggregates a family around himself, but like, he still thinks like a loner, right? Like we've seen it's very hard for Bruce to think like a father, like a mentor. He's a leader. He loves barking orders at people, but like organizing a whole web of like resistance is not something that we've seen him do a whole lot, right? And Terry, operates much the same way. So I feel like, yeah, there's a difference between individualism and collectivism that I think the two characters represent.
Yeah, I almost, when looking at Dakota and beyond, I almost took a Black Panther look at it with regards to Wakanda and how it kind of made itself, not to use the word utopia, but it kind of made
Yeah, that's
itself,
fine. Yeah.
it made itself what it is by itself. It didn't need outside of help anymore. And then by the time we get to the end of Black Panther, we see where they're now trying to share
Yeah.
stuff with the world. And we see Dakota doing the same thing. We're trying to share the Q grids and things of that nature. So yeah, the idea of seeing Dakota get from where it was in its history to where it is now was just a clear contrast to what we see with Neo Gotham, that despite having the Neo name, hasn't really changed that much.
Yeah, I think again, like Gotham City is a place where people still go to like make something of themselves, right? So again, I think there's like probably like a socioeconomic class hierarchy that persists there, right? Like you go to Gotham, you're trying to become rich and famous, right? Um, and the people there probably feel a way about that, right? I think that was represented in the character of Daryl in this series, right? Where he's like, to just junk this technology from somewhere else, they want to put it in our city. Like, nah, we don't want that. Versus like, you don't go to Dakota to become rich or famous, right, or powerful. Um, uh, and I think there's a big difference there, and the idea that like, okay, Static is got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, you know, with this whole like Q grid, Q wave endeavor, because he's like, y'all didn't think we could do this, and here we are. So it's just really important to me, like, to talk about how, yeah, the models of heroism probably come very differently with each character that comes from these places, you know?
So Beyond is definitely a story, a somewhat critique of technology. And we especially see it in the last few issues, especially once Terry loses the Batman Beyond suit that we're all used to, this
Yeah,
tech genius. And
the classic. Yeah,
he's now succumbed to having to use this suit that just basically requires him to rely on his wits and his training
yeah.
to,
His inherent abilities, right? There's
yeah.
no assists like with this suit. Yeah.
Yeah, what were your thoughts about putting this all together? As I mean, even from the standpoint of Shutdown and that name, and by the end he's saying, I'm not human anymore. I'm this tech monster, and we get this back and forth where Virgil calls everybody a kid, but he doesn't call him Shutdown. He's calling him a kid, and he calls everybody a kid. But Terry's calling him by his name. He's saying Melvin, And so as you look at this with this idea of yeah, technology can get us somewhere, but it can also corrupt. And we see that with Shutdown and his story and how the Q juice and his exposure to it, made him who he was. But when looking at how you put this together, how did you find a balance to not be too much of a criticism of technology while showing its usefulness as well?
Yeah, so a couple of things. Um, Shutdown as a character largely springs from Nick's mind, uh, you know, like I said, the genesis of this project was Nick lobbying to do a follow up to the Static Beyond story from the Milestone 30th anniversary special. So Nick and I get to talking, and those conversations led to like Shutdown being the character that he was, somebody who's anti-technology, a young person who feels like um, technology doesn't expand the possibilities of what it's able to do to the world, but it reduces them, right? And I think that's something that a lot of us feel right now, especially those of us in the creative class of people who, a lot of us make comics. And like, every day I can go on Facebook or other social media platforms and see my work and the work of my peers and friends being bastardized and like, for engagement. So like, that's not a good feeling. And we infuse all that into Melvin, right? But on the flip side, Virgil's whole hope for the future rests on this technology that he's developed, right? And I think one of the things we see is the people who control and implement and spread these technologies, what their like priorities are morally, ethically, like um, changes how we engage with them, how they impact us, and what it means to even create or be human, like in the shadow of these technologies, right? So all of that is in the various characters, but especially Melvin, right? But the other thing is like I don't know how subtle it is because ultimately a lot of this execution came from my words, but like the one thing I was aiming at was uh, Terry really is like the arbiter, the avatar of like emotional intelligence in this series. He has his own art to grow on, right? Like he's cocky at the start, um, to the point where like he has a big responsibility towards the blackout even happening in this series. But like the conversations that he has with Virgil, like in issue 3, Virgil's like, "Hey, that Batman is yours now. You can make it what you want." And for me, Terry has a different type of emotional intelligence, a different level of like empathy for Bruce, because while their origin stories are the same, they both suffer the death of a loved one that leads them to becoming Batman. Terry doesn't cut himself off from the world. Bruce is like what 8, 10, whenever his
Mm-hmm.
parents die, and he from then on he's like, "That's it. I'm done being a human being. I'm turning myself into a weapon against crime and injustice." Right? Like, um, he rejects a lot of the social interactions that could humanize him more. Doesn't really have a family. Romance is spotty. His history, and Alfred's his only link to like anything resembling like standardized human interactions, and so he's just not a people person, right? But Terry's like still a kid who goes to high school, has friends, has family, a little brother. Um, he can relate to people in a different way, and one thing I tried to do was like map out an arc for Terry across the series where like he's the one who gets through to Melvin, Like yeah, there's a closest in age and they go to the same high school and whatnot. But like he understands where Melvin's coming from. And in the last couple of issues, he's like, I get why you're holding on to fear and rage, right? Because this world just seems like it's ordered against you. I understand that, especially with the losses that Terry has suffered. So I feel like, if we can break things down in such a way, the emotional labor in this book, really, Terry does all the heavy lifting.
Yeah,
most of the heavy lifting.
Yeah, because I remember in the beginning, the first few issues, Melvin was just that kid, who was at the protest. He was just that kid in Terry's class. He wasn't a friend. He was just that kid. But Terry grew to, really relate to him. So yeah, I really dug that relationship and how Terry really did take the burden. He never stopped. By the time we get to the end, he never stopped realizing that Melvin was still inside of Shutdown.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So we also see by the end of the issue, those member planets of the Cooperative made their move. And their move was, to get the Q juice, but to use Melvin as a countermeasure to attack the Justice League.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, and this story was to continue, because we see that by the end of the issue, a decision hasn't been made on Earth's request to join.
Yeah.
In an ideal world, and this story is continuing, should the planet really join the Cooperative, considering the politics of everything that's going on, considering what happens?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we start issue 1, Virgil's in space with the Justice League, testing the Shockwave spaceship, hoping that this will be like the last box that needs to get checked for Earth to enter into the Cooperative. And I think he's operating from a little place of naivete, right? About like, hey, what are space politics even like, right? It's got to be better. They've figured out all these big problems. But nah, sentience or sentience wherever they are, and some people are going to want what other people have, right? So we see that in the representatives from Tamarin and the other planet. But I think by the end of the story, you're like, yeah, they have their own agendas and motives, and they just see Earth as like another resource that they can extract. And F a Justice League, we'll go around them or through them if we can. I mean, it's not that easy, right? Create this idea that Earth can be part of a larger affiliation of planets, if things are right, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If they're not trying to mess with us, if they're not trying to take from us, then the benefits to be reaped are obvious. But if y'all just trying to play in our face, we can take our ball of Q juice and go home. So that was part of it. And I also wanted again, to me, this is fusing stuff from the Dakotaverse, various iterations throughout the decades, and the Justice League, unlimited continuity, DCAU continuity, even a little bit of Young Justice, which isn't technically the DCAU as I understand it. But we've seen intergalactic politics play out on that show too, and Icon being and some of that moving through Icon as a character. So I just wanted to play with all that stuff. And I love the cosmic side of the DC universe. We got Kaluans up in there. We got mentions of the Vega system. All of that was stuff I wanted to play with. And it wasn't until the first couple of issues where I remembered, oh right, Mike Ron's black in the JLU, right? There's an episode where he gets into a fight, his costume gets torn, and you see that brown skin showing, and it's yeah, so he's not gonna be down for the okie doke either, which is not to say he has any kind of better moral compass because it's a black person, but we can certainly imagine if you're growing up black on Earth in the United States, the histories, and you're not trying to get see any repeat of that stuff that happening, right? So that was probably subconscious for me, but like it still fit into the themes that I want to explore with the story. Yeah, to give you like a really real question, like I think Earth is going to be wary of playing around in causal politics, especially as regards the cooperative. You know, that's all I'll say about that.
Okay.
About that.
Well, we see Micron. You know, he has a few appearances. Well, we saw a couple of other cameos as well. Were there any characters that you really thought of adding in that you just couldn't fit in?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know. I might get in trouble for saying this, but whatever. The thing is done. Um, the whole sequence in issue 3 where they revive Static was happened completely differently, and the main mechanism was going to be Third Rail, actually, from Blood Syndicate. You know, he's the guy who converts like mass into energy, and vice versa. And the idea was to have him be part of what jump started Static. But you know, decisions were made to go in a different way, and it's fine. I mean, I'm happy with the way it came out. I think it's the lightning storm sequence is arguably more exciting. So yeah, I mean, you know, comics are collaborative efforts, so I was happy to like pivot and go in a different direction. But yeah, I tried to slip in some cameos like that. There wasn't anybody else I really couldn't use. I had, in a similar fashion, that showdown in Dakota City between Ebon and Derek Powers, aka Blight, originally was Hot Streak, who I was going to have there, but we wanted to like keep up the theme of mixing up Neo Gotham characters and Dakota characters, so we pivoted that way. But yeah, like I think it still works. And again, Derek Powers represents somebody from the executive class, the extractor class, the overseer class, who, again, to me embodies that kind of like Neo Gotham, but still old Gotham sensibility, where like he's like, I'm rich, I'm powerful, I get to do what I want. And Ewan's like, nah, we're not here. We got antibodies to fight y'all. You're kind of an infection right here. So yeah.
I was hoping that at some point, Raquel would have like, yeah, I know I'm mayor, but you know what? Let me suit up. I mean, Beacon is one thing, but still having a Rocket appearance would have been fun to see.
Yeah, I mean, look, again, like I said, a couple of questions ago, part of what I want to do is show these characters grow, and like, look, it has been long established continuity that Raquel had a son, and I just wanted to fulfill, like, to answer the question that still was seemingly hanging in the air. Yo, what does the kid become? And to me, it was that. Fun fact, and I gotta post about this because I haven't shared it out. But Beacon is actually a super deep cut from the Milestone comics. I want to say it was after the main line ended, one of the Static series, I think it was Rebirth of the Cool, that had a letters page, and it was just like a little character preview box. It was like, who is Beacon, if I'm remembering correctly. And I'm like, bet. I got something. I know what I'm gonna do with this. And it was just bringing it forward, like they didn't say back then whether it was Amistad, but I'm like, let's have Raquel pass this mantle on, and grow into another kind of protector for Dakota. Because if you remember those early Icon comics from the original Milestone books that started in 93, Augustus, aka Icon, had an intimate relationship with the mayor of Dakota City, who wound up being implicated in some of the Big Bang stuff as well. So, like, to me, again, we're blending continuities here, but Raquel knows that, sees that, and she's like, clearly somebody else needs to be running this city, and I'm going to make a point of growing into this kind of person, because she knows what happens when there are moral and operational failures at that level. The Big Bang happens, people die, people's lives get changed. And again, she's a character who grew up in the aftermath of that trauma, and she doesn't want to see it repeat itself.
So we're coming up on time soon, so I would definitely want to get into.
I can go a little bit longer, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, I definitely want to get into the art and working with Nick and
who?
with the art.
Oh, the art, yeah.
Working with Nick is one thing, and he just has that style. But Miguel Mendonca eventually joined in and took over the interiors while
I think it's Mendoza, but I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for correcting me. And while Nick continued on the covers.
Yeah.
Did you have to change anything with regards to the collaboration with going from working with Nick on the art, who kind of spearheaded the story as well with working with Miguel?
Yeah, so yes, they obviously have two very different art styles and storytelling sensibilities, right? With Nick, you get moodier, like more design focused page layouts. His influences in terms of like anime and manga, and those visual languages are obviously super apparent. And he does really intense palette of moods, right? In his artwork. And Miguel is like, to me, more of like a widescreen, like classic superhero artist, right? He's worked on like Batman books and other stuff in the DCU mainline. So when that pivot happened, I was like, okay, yeah, like let's ramp up the technology, let's ramp up the kind of I think busyness of the page, because that's what his style seems to like be hungry for, right? But also, like, I want to explore certain things from like a page layout perspective. Like, there's that big double page spread. I think it's in 4 or 5, I don't remember. Where static, is kind of like re-energizing the Q juice, and we see like basically an explanation of what Q juice is, how it affects people, and that kind of stuff. And like, I've never written that kind of sequence before, and that was pushing myself and hoping that Miguel will be able to meet me where I want to go, and he did and exceeded it. And that was really, part of the joy of working in comics is that it's so collaborative. And like all I'm doing is writing some words, in a script, right? Like the people who really bring it to life are Nick, are Miguel, are letterers and colorists across this project. And it really is like a collective effort. And there are multiple like facets of this story to explore, right? Like the interpersonal relationships, the impact of technology, the like global and like cosmic perspectives, and the way Nick draws like a space battle is different than the way Miguel draws it. But I feel like both of them use their strengths to show different aspects of the same kind of like paradigm. You know what I'm saying? Miguel can pull out the camera and show like all this crazy action, and Nick channels like the energy of the conflict in a different way. So I just, I count myself really lucky.
So, what's next? What would be next for this team? Again, at the end we get the panel. It's Terry, it's Virgil, and it's Melvin. Could you see a universe established with the folks of Beyond, and just it could be centered on Neo Gotham and Dakota, or it could be an even more intergalactic, as including, the Cooperative trying to be sinister and get its hands on the Q juice? Because it looked like you leave the door open for that.
Yeah, look, I don't want to. I've only thought some of this out because ultimately this depends on whether DC wants to do more of that or not, right? And they'll respond to um, what readers want. I will take this time to say, like, um, this book sold really well. I don't have access to all the numbers, but it's a matter of public record that issue one sold out, right? We went to second printing on that, and sales have been strong throughout. Um, I think if the trade does well, that'll be another data point for editorial to consider. But ultimately, that's out of my decisions, right? But like, um, you know, I think Melvin's journey, his redemption arc, is not complete, right? Which is not to say he's gonna backslide into being a bad guy, but like, um, he still lives in a world and a universe. Parts of it want to hurt him, parts of it want to use him, remove his agency from his own life. He's got to reckon with that. Um, and you know, a power set like his, where he can disrupt technology and the flow of energy, um, is going to be a hard one to maintain in a world where like technology's screaming at him from every possible angle, right? So he still has, I think, more of a character development arc waiting to happen for him. So that's one thing. And like, uh, how does Virgil, pick up the pieces and revisit the work he's done to create the Q grid and impact the world, right? Does he double down on that? Does he pull back on it? There's lots of possibilities, and like with Terry, he has to figure out like, hey, how can I make a bigger impact on injustices again across the world and universe, right? Like, sure, he might get back into a cyber suit, that's bleeding edge technology, but I think he understands that like systemically, like these injustices that he's fighting come from all different angles, and that's not to say he hasn't had that understanding in his own solo adventures, something like Cobra, something like Derek Powers, but I think he's gotten some insight from this story that he may not necessarily have had before. So there's definitely places to continue it. And like again, if we go cosmic, if we go, on the interplanetary scale, just unresolved stuff that happened there too. I don't want to necessarily say that the Cooperative itself is inherently evil. They had some bad actors in there, and that's the way alliances go across factions. So what do they do to repair? What does Shira do as part of the council? Like, what does Icon want to see in terms of like how Earth becomes part of the larger like Xeno political stage? So there's all that stuff that's there to explore if DC wants to do more.
Okay. So we reached the end, and as always, we end our show with rapid fire. We're going to do a little bit different because last time we did the video game edition, which was special just for you and your background with working in video games. So this time we're going to go back and we're going to do a little bit on the comic side, somewhat, and we're going to kind of do what I did when I interviewed the chat with the Dakota Incident creative team, and we're going to team up a character from the Dakota universe, from the Milestone universe, with any character within comics, anime, manga, video games, you name it. So first up, let's go with Static.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a very obvious answer, but it's one that doesn't exist yet, so I'm just going to say it. The streets need a Static and Miles Morales crossover. Like the characters are so similar, also very different. Like, I think it's a team up that like is begging to happen. We've seen allusions to it with the Sanford Green cover of Spider-Man, Superman, the Marvel DC crossover. But like, yeah, it needs to happen for real, right? I think it's so obvious that like,
It's instant money.
yeah,
It really
yeah,
is.
yeah, 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 yeah. Um, and like Dennis Cowan is on record as saying like, yeah, Miles probably wouldn't exist without Virgil, and you know, I wasn't around when that stuff was happening. I don't know all the ins and outs, but like, there's so much similarity that I think people would love to explore it. So yeah, next. That's who I got for Static.
Okay, let's go with Rocket.
Man, Rocket. You know what? Again, I have no prep on this, so I'm really freestyling it. But like, I would love to see Rocket in the world of Invincible, because the thing about Invincible is that like it really is like Silver Age comic principles, like through a modern lens. So it's raunchier, it's gorier, but Raquel, when she first became Rocket, that iconic line from the end of I said iconic. I'm about to do that killer line from the end of Icon #1, where she says, "I bet this bleep doesn't happen to Superman." So she's like, yeah, y'all's ideas of what a superhero is supposed to do don't apply to me. So for her to find herself in a universe where it's like, oh, these people extra, extra, extra are breaking the rules, around violence and morality and stuff. So how does she find, her moral center in a place like that? What values does she hold on to? And she's a character who doesn't take any mess. So like, I just would like to see what she would have to say to a Viltrumite, because we know how she deals with Augustus. I would love to see what her an even more raw, like high octane superhero universe would look like.
Okay, yeah, I could see her and Adam Eve getting along pretty well.
Yeah.
All right, next up. Let's see, this might be a little hard one. Tech Nine.
Ooh, Tech Nine. I love me some Tech Nine. I just think, in a way, he's such a '90s character, right? The focus on guns as a superpower. But he's got a lot of empathy. He obviously has shades to his character with, his relationship with Fade and other characters in the Blood Syndicate. His rivalry with Holocaust and the different iterations of the Milestone universe. So, man, where would I put Tech Nine? Again, this is gonna sound wild, but the modern version of Tech Nine, who's a soldier who came back home, I would put him in something like Edge of Tomorrow, the Tom Cruise movie, where like these people's lives are being used as weapons in like a constantly ongoing war. I would like to see what he does in a framework like that. Like he's not immortal, right? But he's a guy who ostensibly doesn't run out of ammunition, right? So like, in a way, he's a perfect warrior for a world like that. So I would just like to see what he does there.
So you mentioned wanting to use third rail earlier. You can use them now. Who would you team them up with?
It's funny. This answer is coming a lot easier to me than I thought it would. But like Amadeus Cho,
Oh, okay.
They're both Korean. They're both big boys. When they want to be. Third rail doesn't have Amadeus's level of genius, smarts, but like I would like to see them interact with each other. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Let's go team level now. Let's go Shadow Cabinet.
Oh man. my mind immediately jumps to Thunderbolts,
Oh,
because the various iterations of that team have been characters looking for redemption, um, playing with the idea of public trust, um, and the Shadow Cabinet operates completely out of sight, right? So, Dharma's sense of morality is very Machiavellian. Um, and again, depending on which version of Thunderbolts you use, Citizen V, aka Baron Zemo, he's obviously amoral. So, like, how do they impact on each other? I'd love to see like Iron Butterfly versus Songbird. What does that look like? Yeah, there's a lot of good matchups that could happen there.
okay. And this is going to be my last one, and I do have one restriction. It can't be Superman. So,
Oh yeah, okay.
So that would be Icon.
Icon, yeah. I mean, look, if we're gonna put Rocket in the Invincible Universe, um, um, uh, Icon versus Omni Man, would be fun to see. But let me think about this for 1 second. To me, the most appealing thing about Icon is that he's a character who you could use to encapsulate the entire 20th century, especially as concerns the Black experience in America, right? So part of it seems to be begging like for a crossover with like Black Panther and the lineage of kings and queens across Wakanda, right? Like, how does the existence of somebody like him change what the people who've sat on the throne in Wakanda think about the possibilities of the outside world? So yeah, I mean, part of my answer is informed by the fact that I wrote a piece long time ago when I was still a journalist after the Black Panther movie came out and made all that money. I was like, yeah, if Warner Brothers wants to replicate the success, they make an Icon movie, because Icon, I think, has the potential to speak to a multi-generational audience, the same one that showed up for Black Panther, like your aunties and uncles, you show him in the 70s doing this thing and be like, yeah, they can vibe with that. He's a window into Black history from the 19th century. And like I said, the entire 20th century, I think there's a lot of potential for that character to work across history. And I think that's one of the similar strengths that the Black Panther mythology has, is that, like, yeah, it can show people from the Black diaspora dealing with various historical events and concerns. And I think there could be a lot of, common cause there.
Okay. Well, Evan Narcisse, thank you so much for joining me. How can fans keep up with what's going on with you? What projects are you working on that you can discuss right now?
Nothing I can talk about now. Nothing I can talk about now, such as the life of a creative professional sometimes. But yeah, if you want to follow me anywhere, Blue Sky's your best bet. My handle is Evnarc, EVNARC. On that platform. So that's the best place.
And I will have links in the show notes as always. But Evan Narcisse, thank you so much. Batman Static Beyond, it's on shelves, issue number 6. I would assume DC will put out the trade paperback.
Yeah, the trade paperback has been announced, and it's coming out in August. I want to say the first week of August. I think it's August.
Okay, so it should be in the August solicits when it posts to the website.
If you've been waiting for the trade, time has almost come.
All right. Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining me here on the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. As always, it's been a joy.
I appreciate you reaching out to me, Theo. Thanks a lot.
All right. So again, I want to thank Evan Narcisse for joining me here on the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. Batman Static Beyond number 6 is out on shelves at a comic shop near you. If you haven't picked it up yet, please do so. But yeah, if you're waiting for the trade paperback, as mentioned in the interview, it is slated to come out in the month of August. It was not in the solicits for the month of July. So yeah, be on the lookout for that in August if you are the type that like to wait for trade paperbacks to come out and get those as they are released. But yeah, it is a great story that looks at some really good characters that generations apart, but have a lot in common. So I am hoping to see more of an interaction between Terry and Virgil sometime in the future, and just more of the characters from the Milestone universe in the future as well. But with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about my favorite titles this week for New Comic Book Day, May the 6th. And yeah, there was some good stuff. We had a lot of new titles, or a lot of new issues as always, considering that it's the beginning of the month. So we know we have some of those usuals with Batman and some of the absolute titles. But with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump right on into my top 5. So before jumping into my top 5, let me just say how impressed I have been over the past year with how DC has been releasing some of its titles. It's just been some great stories that have been coming out from the publisher. And it's primarily due to what's been going on in its absolute universe that has really taken things by storm. But that's not to say things in the main continuity hasn't been great as well, because it has, especially the new Batman run by Matt Fraction and Jorge Jimenez. And you'll see that as we go through the top 5, as DC takes up my top 3 spots for this week. But in the number 5 spot for this week, we have Fall of the House of Slaughter, number 1, written by Tate Brombo with art from Adriano Tertulisi over at Boom Studios, which says a lot, because I am typically not a suspense fan, a thriller fan. Well, not necessarily suspense, but a thriller or horror genre fan in comics. But I found this story to be absolutely amazing as it kicks off a quest to find a new dragon. And so with Fall of the House of Slaughter, the old dragon of the Black Mask is dying. And when that happens, the other heads of the Order of St. George come together to identify a new dragon to take over the house. And the house that needs a new dragon is the House of Slaughter. And we see Cecilia Slaughter, who dons a white mask, work her particular machinations in order to ensure that she secures the gold teat of the dragon of the House of Slaughter. And in doing so, she reaches out to Maxine, and Maxine is the final remaining member of the house who wears a black mask, and she uses her to watch over the old dragon as he lies dying, or he's on his deathbed, and then to kind of report back anything that may happen, and to protect him from the other mask getting in and potentially manipulating him. But we see, the other head masks come together, and they start debating who should succeed the old dragon. And of course, to no one's surprise, no one is nominating Cecilia, which she expected. which led her to get Maxine to help her out on her end being the lone member with the black mask. And what we see by the time the story ends, and again, it's a lot of politics in there. There's not much that we would typically find in something that's killing the children, but we do see that there is a real massacre that occurred at a school that they are dealing with. But it's mainly about the politics of selecting the next dragon of the house, the next one to get the gold teeth. And by the time we get to the end, we get some stunning news as Maxine is alone in the room with the old dragon as he again lay dying. He's hooked up to machines, and as she talks to him, he responds, and he reveals that Erica Slaughter is still alive. And so that is quite a cliffhanger to say at the end of the first issue, considering, again, if you've been following everything that's been going on in something that's killing the children, you know that she has been presumed dead. And now we see from the old dragon that she isn't. And so we can see what's going to be coming next of that. So, of course, something's killing the children. Something that's killing the children is, of course, of the world of James Tynion and that team over at Boom Studios. But Tate Brownlow has taken this story, and we're going to see what happened and how the politics of naming the next dragon is going to play out, especially now with the reveal that Erica is alive, at least according to the old dragon. So we'll see what happens and what comes from that. But it was good enough of a story for me to pick it up and enjoy it, and for it to make its way into my top 5 for the week. Beastfire, Kayla, over on the website, she reviewed this story as well. So I won't reveal her score, but go ahead and take a look. You know that she of all of our writers over at the Comic Book Spot really dig, that genre. So go ahead and take a look at it and see what her thoughts are of it. But that is my number 5 book for this week. Fall of the House of Slaughter, number 1, from Tate Brownlow and Adriano Tertulisi over at Boom Studios. Okay, in the number 4 spot, Mark Spector Moon Knight, number 4, written by Jed McKay with art from Deb Romanique over at Marvel Comics. So I have had an up and down relationship with regards to the various volumes of Moon Knight that Jed McKay has done. But the last few have just been really great, going back to Fist of Khonshu and this current one with Mark Spector Moon Knight. And so we see in issue 4 that Mark has returned. He is in the office of Andrea Sturman, and all his allies are missing. Tiger's gone, Hunter's Moon is gone, A-Ball is gone, Reese and Soldier, they're all missing. And we see that Dr. Sturman has relayed to Mark that they've gone missing after looking for him. He's been gone for weeks, and they set out to find him and haven't been seen since. And she basically tells the story of how they identified this series of buildings, but particularly the House of Shadows that they entered going to look for Mark. And throughout the issue, she's basically telling the story. And, they go as far as seeking out assistance from Khonshu as well, who is unable to see Mark. But they've gone missing, and they've gone missing inside of this house looking for Mark. And so he now sets out to find his allies, to find Tigra and the rest of the gang. And he goes and he gets Gunnar, the soul-taking sword, and he takes that with him as well. And as he makes his way to this house, the House of Shadows, he meets up with both Frazier and Flint, who are also able to see the house. And that's one thing also of note, that not everybody can see this house. It is basically invisible, but because of everyone's interaction and involvement with the Midnight Mission, they are able to see this house. And so Mark gets Frazier and Flint to kind of hold off the NYPD, to keep them away from the area, as he decides to go in, and he is going to find his friends, and if necessary, he's going to quote unquote kill the house. But it's been, like I said, it's been a roller coaster of a relationship with the various volumes of Moon Knight from Jed MacKay. He's been doing it for quite a while. These last few, though, have been really great, going back to not actually Fist of Khonshu, but close to the end of his previous one, as well as some of the stories that were told by Erica Schultz as we were coming out of the Blood Hunt event. And so, but since then, things have been just really great for Moon Knight as far as I'm concerned. You know, he's always been one of my favorite characters after Batman and She-Hulk. But I've really been enjoying this run. The art continues to be great. I don't know if I can say the same for the covers. I have not been a huge fan of the covers from Paulo Siqueira. They're okay, but you know, I've seen other Moon Knight covers that are far better. I actually like the variant covers for this issue so much more. They were better, but the story in itself is really good, and I've just been enjoying, again, the last few iterations of Moon Knight that Jed MacKay has been penning over there at Marvel. So we shall see what happens as Mark enters this House of Shadows to find his colleagues and to get them back to safety. And I know particularly he wants to find Tigra. But I have been enjoying this crew, you know, for a while, and how MacKay has been basically pairing them all together, going back again through the various volumes of Moon Knight since then. And I've gotten a great level of respect for 8-Ball, the former villain, and how he has truly fit in with the team. But after Mark himself, Hunter's Moon is probably my favorite character of the group. But we shall see what happens as we get into issue 5 and whether or not Mark is able to retrieve or able to save his friends who are actually trying to save him. And we shall see how that all plays out. But that is my number 4 book for this week. Mark Spector, Moon Knight, number 4, from writer Jed MacKay and artist Deb Pramanik over at Marvel Comics. In the number 3 spot, Absolute Superman number 19, written by Jason Aaron with art from Rafa Sandoval, over at DC Comics. So this is part 2 of the story that reveals and debuts the Absolute Universe's version of Black Adam in the name of King Shazam. It's a great story, and it has actually several subplots in it. The very first being somewhat of a origin backstory of Steel, John Henry Irons, and we see how he came to be involved with Lazarus Corps and how he ended up working for them for a while. But the ultimate big story is that between Kal-El and Tet Adam, aka King Shazam, whereas, King Shazam has been basically in stasis all of these centuries, and he is ready to extract revenge on those who did this, which comes in the form of Ra's al Ghul. And, Ra's, reveals that he was the one that, kept Tet Adam, kept King Shazam locked away for as long as he was. And for doing so, Tet Adam destroys him, just basically tears Ra's al Ghul limb from limb, beheads him and everything. And Talia, just seems to be, kind of in this catatonic state almost, where she kind of loses her capacity to understand what's really happening. She picks up the head of her dead father, and, she just looks at it before Kal-El is kind of able to subdue her. But eventually this gets into a big battle between Kal-El and King Shazam that really goes all over the world. And eventually Steel gets involved as well, with, his mace, well, not his mace, but with his hammer, really packing a wallop. But I mentioned Mace, and that's simply because by the time we get to the end of the story, Hawkman makes his way into the battle, more or less, when he, tries to get Steel to stand down, and Steel's like, yeah, that ain't happening. But, by the time we get to the last page, it's the four of them, both the battling Kal-El and King Shazam, as well as Steel and Hawkman. And so makes me wonder what's going to happen next as the four combatants, stand looking at each other as the story comes to an end. But Absolute Superman, again, all of the stories within the Absolute Universe have just been great from the start. And this issue of Absolute Superman is no different. I really, really enjoyed it. I know there have been some stories where Rafa Sandoval has not been doing the interiors, but he has returned to do it here. And again, his take on Kal-El and all of the characters within Absolute Superman have just been, really unique. Really love it. And now we see King Shazam in this story as well, which was really weird when you look at the beginning. He is bearded up. I mean, just a huge beard. And by the time he and Kal-El are battling each other, he's clean shaven. But yeah, I can't wait to see what's next in this story with issue number 20. But yeah, the voices that Jason Aaron gives to these characters has just been nothing short of masterful, and I really have been enjoying every issue of not just Absolute Superman, but also the other titles of the Absolute Universe. But yeah, this was just a great issue, and I absolutely loved how, the battle between these two mega beings because it's still unknown whether or not King Shazam is on the good side or not, especially considering in this universe he gets his power from Brainiac. So we shall see what happens next. So we shall see. But that is my number 3 book for this week. Absolute Superman, number 19, from writer Jason Aaron and art from Rafa Sandoval over at DC Comics. Okay, in the number 2 spot, the aforementioned Batman Static Beyond number 6, written by Evan Narcisse with art from Miguel Mendonça over at DC Comics. Again, it's the final issue. You heard the interview already. I'm not going to add too much more to it other than to talk about how much more I would love to see of this story that can definitely be continued. I like the idea of seeing, not necessarily Static. Well, I like the idea of seeing Shutdown and Terry team up with Virgil as some sort of mentor to go along with what's going on with Bruce in Neo Gotham. But I think a team up with Terry and Melvin would be a great story to continue the Beyond universe with. I absolutely, just love this story. I ended up getting all 6 issues, of course, and I actually, with this last issue, ended up getting another cover in addition to the main cover from Nicholas Draper Ivy, but I also ended up getting the Fico Orcio variant of this issue as well. But yeah, this was just a great story that not only showed the maturity of Virgil Hawkins in this continuation of the story from the milestone 30th anniversary, but we also see some growth in Terry as well, not just from a personality standpoint, but also from the standpoint of, not relying too much on the technology that has typically been his forte as Batman Beyond. But, those last few issues with him being in a more OG bat suit was really good in, helping him grow and relying more on his instincts and his skills that Bruce has taught him in his time as Batman. But again, don't want to add anything more than what I already said in the interview with Evan Narcisse, but this was just a great story and a great overall miniseries. And like I said, this could definitely be something that can be, just implanted into the main continuity of DC as well, considering the story that we got with the Dakota incident and all of the players that were in that story as well from the Milestone universe. But again, that is my number 2 book for this week, Batman Static Beyond, number 6, from writer Evan Narcisse with art from Miguel Mendonça over at DC Comics. And so that's it. We have reached the end. My number 1 book for this week, and my number 1 book is Batman number 9, written by Matt Fraction with art from guest artist Ryan Suck over at DC Comics. And there's several reasons why this book tops my list for this week. Yeah, not only because it was a great story as we continue this war that Vandal Savage and Pamela Isley, aka Poison Ivy, has put out on Batman and the family, but also what it sets up. So, earlier this year we got late last year going into this year, we got the announcement of the new the new volume or the second act of DC with Next Level. And one of the titles of Next Level was Barbara Gordon Breakout. Well, me not expecting it, this story ties directly into what we're going to see in Barbara Gordon Breakout. And that was just a great connection. You know, Ian, who reviews Batman over at the Batman universe, and I were talking not only about this issue, but also talking about Barbara Gordon Breakout as well, since we've already had the chance to take a look at it. And just the connection with putting this story together and how these two somehow are connected was just great. You know, we were almost harkening back to the days of James Tynan's run on Batman along with Mariko Tamaki on Tech, and just how most of the titles, if not all of the titles in the Batman room at that time had a connection with one another, even going as much as what was going on in Cesar Castellucci's Batgirl, for better or worse. But this story is really going to tie right into what happens in Barbara Gordon Breakout. And, you know, what we see again, you know, this war that Savage has kind of talked Poison Ivy into doing against Batman and the family is really going into full force now. But what we also see happen is we kind of see Batman and the family lay a trap. It's almost as if they want to be caught, you know, at some point and somewhere. But as we see by the end of the issue, the one that gets caught is Barbara Gordon. And, you know, we see that, you know, she's captured, and is brought in by the end of it. And it was just a wild, crazy, you know, run in this issue when you see how all of the things are laid out. Everything was just perfectly laid out, including the interaction between Bruce and Damian as he sets Damian on a mission that was originally supposed to be his. And he, you know, sends his son to do it instead. And, you know, that mission, ironically, which just blew my mind, was the destruction of Wayne Manor, which, of course, is the home of Vandal Savage right now. But, you know, seeing Damian press the button to detonate the bomb that destroyed Bruce's childhood home and his original base of operations was just something to see. I wonder if Matt Fraction had a hard time selling that to the folks at DC Editorial, but apparently not, because we surely see it happen. And again, you know, homes can be rebuilt. You know, we can even be as real as looking at Batman Begins, where Bruce swears to rebuild the manor just the way it was, brick by brick. And I guess we can possibly see that happen in the future as well. But just the idea that, you know, again, it was originally Bruce's mission to blow up the manor, but he instead gives it to Damian. And in doing so, have a good conversation with his son about, you know, where they have been and where they are now as father and son, and, you know, the hopes that Bruce has for those two. So that was just a great interaction. But again, the whole plot was, you know, for the family to lose, and in particular for Babs to be the one that is captured. And we see that she's captured. She, in turns, basically do away with, you know, all that makes her Oracle. She destroys the watchtower or the bell tower and all of the equipment that was housed there, and, you know, leaves nothing that can be traced. But we see, she's captured. And by the time she is brought into the police station, she's roughed up. So I don't know what happens off panel, whether she has a battle with some of the officers or not. But, Babs is arrested and brought in. And again, this leads directly into what we're going to get in Barbara Gordon Take Breakout. Again, first issue will be out on this coming Wednesday on the 13th. And I've already had a chance to look at it. BJ over on the Batman universe will be taking a look and reviewing it for the site. But yeah, it was a great story with Breakout as well. But getting back to Batman, the art was really good considering, it's Ryan Sook. Ryan Sook is not a Jorge Jimenez, but Ryan is an established artist as well, and I've always been a fan of his. I'm okay with the style that he brought, and him filling in for Jorge for this issue. Jorge still did the cover, of course, but yeah, this was just a great story leading into another great story that was really good thus far. And again, I don't want to spoil what's going to happen in Barbara Gordon Breakout in the first issue, but I think we have something to look forward to as we continue this run by Matt Fraction, and what it also leads to in Barbara Gordon Breakout. And I don't want to spoil that issue, but great story, great art. The cover from Jorge was just stunning. There are some crazy good variant covers for this issue as well. The one that I really enjoyed, and I really should have picked it up, was the one from Dustin Nguyen. That had Damien front and center, but also had Duke and Bruce and Steph on the cover. But you couldn't do wrong with either of the covers that you picked up. There was also, and I'm assuming it was a foil variant of Jorge's main cover. But yeah, it was just a great story that will lead into Barbara Gordon Breakout, and I think you all will truly enjoy that, and I'll probably be talking more about it in the future. But yeah, that's it. My number one book for this week, Batman number 9 from writer Matt Fraction with art from Ryan Sook over at DC Comics. And so there you have it. My top 5 books for this past week. Fall of the House of Slaughter number 1, Mark Spector Moon Knight number 4, Absolute Superman number 19, Batman Static Beyond number 6, and my number 1 book for the week, Batman number 9. Again, it was a pretty good week for the folks over at DC Comics. They really brought it with the stories that they released this week. And, there are several others I probably could have spoken of in an honorable mention, but I wanted to make sure that we had time for the interview with Evan Narcisse. However, before leaving for this episode, I did want to talk about and do something new that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the episode, and that is to speak about an indie title that I read a few weeks ago, and I considering a lot of things that have been going on social media, I felt the need to go ahead and really start highlighting some indie titles that I read and I really like. And when I say indie titles, I don't mean from the standpoint of indie publishers like Dark Horse or Boom, or Mad Cave, those larger indie publishers. But I'm speaking of indie publishers that, do a lot of their publishing on their own. They're self-publishing. They do, they get a lot of their revenue for pushing campaigns, for example, on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, or, they just have their own website and they use word of mouth to get their content out there. And so the title that I want to talk about that I read a few weeks ago, it is Beautiful Thema number 1. It was written by Harold Pete, with art from Giorgia Rosati, and it's by New Horizon Comics. This New Horizon comic universe was kicked off with Spirit, which is all based in Chicago. And Beautiful Thema is a story about a vigilante who, has a mean streak when it comes to crime in her neighborhood. And she's someone who runs a community center for at-risk kids, and the area that she lives in has a lot of gang activity. The gang that really pounds the dirt out there is called the Dog Pound, or the 99 Dog Pound, and they are led by a ruthless guy named Bulldog. But what we see in Thema number 1 is we see that she is already established as a known vigilante in this part of Chicago, and is known not only to the neighborhood but also to law enforcement. But she is ruthless in taking out these members of the DP99, as they refer to themselves, who make no bones about running things. I mean, in broad daylight, they are doing recruiting young kids, including kids that utilizes Thema's community center, and her name is Kalisha. That's her known name to the community, Kalisha Brown. But we see that this is someone who really has a problem with the police because she was affected by a crime that happened to her, and that seems to have gone by the wayside with Chicago PD. So she has kind of taken the law into her own hands and, protecting members of her community. And we see that the attacks on her are coming from all sides. Again, there are some members of the police force who don't care for her. One police officer actually transfers to the district covering that area simply for the purpose of putting her behind bars. We have members of the media who are gunning for her. One just, is moved from the sports desk and is moved to the city beat just for the purpose of trying to, trash Thema and to show that she is not what she seems. So she's getting it thrown at her from all sides. But the one thing that keeps her going is the fact that she is pretty loved by her community. They stick up for her, including, with the media, the writer who is intent on destroying the name of Thema. But it's an interesting story, especially as we get to the end, because again, the Dog Pound gang, the 99 Dogs, DP99, they are recruiting heavily. And again, as I mentioned earlier, they're recruiting kids that utilize this Kalisha's community center. And we see, that one kid that they attempted to recruit earlier in the story, they're back at it, and this time the kid fights back. They go to the community center, and Kalisha actually trains them in karate. So he fights back, and this time the gang member that's trying to get them to join isn't taking no for an answer, and as he is kicked and punched by this kid by the name of Tavarius, he pulls out a gun and shoots. So we don't know whether or not he actually shoots Tiberius, but we can only assume so because as Kalisha is running out from a store to head back and run in that direction to where they are, she is screaming Tiberius' name. But it was actually a good story, a good number one issue, and again, it is a part of a larger universe, and we see that several times in the story as the name Spirit is mentioned. Spirit is the first story, the first title that came out of New Horizon that is a part of this universe. So of course I got the digital copy, but I also ended up buying the variant cover from Delio Diaz, and man, that cover is absolutely stunning. The style in which he drew Dima in her costume, but man, it looks almost like he painted it on her, and I absolutely loved that. It was an absolutely great cover. So that was the one that I ordered, but it was a great story. I truly enjoyed it. I can't wait to see when H.W. Pete does the campaign for issue number 2. I hope to be able to get him on at the time he does so, and we see how this universe over at New Horizon Comics really begin to flourish. I do know that there are 2 issues of Spirit that are out already. This was Beautiful Thema number 1, so I'm assuming we get some more out of that. And I'm assuming we'll get a crossover or 2 as this universe continues to grow. But I truly enjoyed it. And if you want to check it out, you can head on over to New Horizons website to order a copy of Beautiful Thema. Again, you can get the digital copy, or you can get either of the 3 covers. There were 3 covers, 2 variants, and the main cover. Again, I got the variant cover from Delio Diaz, but there's also a variant cover from Ritas Blanco that's out there. So yeah, that's my indie spotlight title for this episode. Again, that is Beautiful Thema number 1 from H.W. Pete with art from Giorgio Rosati over at New Horizon Comics. And so that's going to do it for this episode, the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I want to thank you all for tuning in here on the Comic Bin's YouTube page and listening in on your favorite audio podcast platform. Next time I am going to be sitting with comic book writers Matthew Hardy and Rob Jones. We are going to be talking about War of the Worlds, Thunderchild. It is the hardcover edition that is going to be coming out from Titan Comics in the month of June. So it is also a story that is coming out of a Kickstarter campaign. They did a Kickstarter campaign for this story a few years ago, and now they are bringing it back with Titan Comics as a collected edition. So we'll talk about it. We talk about the story behind the Thunderchild, which is actually mentioned in H.G. Wells' hit story from many years ago. But that's going to be our topic. That's going to be our main topic next week as I sit with Rob Jones and Matthew Hardy. And then, of course, I'll be looking at my favorite titles from this past week. So, again, that's going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I truly appreciate you all listening in, and I will be seeing you all next time in a week or so as I talk about War of the Worlds, Thunderchild, and my top 5. And I have something interesting as far as my indie spotlight. It's kind of old, but it's something that's very relevant, especially as it continues to roll. But yeah, be on the lookout for that as well. But I will be seeing you guys next time. Thank you all for tuning in. Again, if this is your first time listening to the Comic Bin, hit that subscribe button so that you can be reminded every time a episode drops here on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform. But until next time, keep reading those comics, and I'll see you guys on the other side. That is going to do it for this episode of the Comic Bin Comic Book Podcast. I'd like to thank you all for your continued support of the program. The Comic Bin Podcast, as well as the Comic Book Spot, are a part of the Comic Book Source family of sites and media. You can follow the podcast on Twitter X at comic_bin, or my personal account at BatmanFan_4life. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. We're all over social media. You can also follow our sister site over at thebatmanuniverse.net for all of your news and reviews in the world of Batman. Tune in next time as we give you more in the world of comic books. Again, we truly appreciate your support. But until we meet again next time, keep reading those comics.